the last in the series. If you've managed to follow all this through from Genesis 1:27, and we're getting towards Genesis chapter 4 now. And it isn't a very happy story so far, because we've had our human nature exposed as being in rebellion against God, misaligned, dislocated from where we should be. And this has negative consequences, and we have begun to explore those. We're cut off from ourselves, we're cut off from each other. So we have dysfunctional relationship with ourselves, male have dysfunctional relationship with other males, and a more dysfunctional relationship with females, and obviously the other way around as well. So that's part of the problem. And then this dysfunctional relationship with God has negative consequences both for male and female, and issues in their lives which are there to remind them of that negativity in their relationship with God. And there is a big gap between us and God, which is expressed by the driving out of the male and the female from the Garden of Eden. And what's more, they can't get back by their own efforts, because God stations cherubim, spiritual heavenly beings, with a flaming sword flashing backwards and forwards to make sure that we cannot re-access the tree of life. So that death itself is there in our flesh to remind us of paradise lost. Now, the question is, what do we do about it? The instinctive reaction is to fall into religion. So that going back century upon century, thousands of years, we get elaborate religion with the objective of trying to contradict the fall. We can see that expressed even in something like the Stonehenge complex, where there is a great focus towards an afterlife and eternity. But eternity, if it's positive, would be what we had in the Garden of Eden. An unimpaired relationship with God. But we cannot regain that. So all our religious acts do is one way or another confirm the truth of Genesis 3. We're trying to get back to what we instinctively know we should have, but we can't get it. We have to create stories for ourselves. But the stories aren't true. They're just comforting. And there are many, many, many ways upon the earth to comfort us into thinking that we have an eternal life that we don't have, that we can't control. When we die, we completely lose control. We might tell the undertakers how to do our funeral, but that's our limit. What happens next when our spirit leaves our body, we have absolutely no control over. We just kid ourselves that we do. But when you actually look at religion, so often it's there to manipulate what happens on this earth, to make us luckier, to make us more prosperous, to get our crops to grow, to make sure we have plenty of children, or whatever it happens to be, to make us feel wiser, to put us on a spiritual level above somebody else, and so on. These days we love religious activity. We don't always admit it's religious activity, but it's often rooted and founded in religion that just makes us more peaceful. In other words, that it suppresses the stress we feel in life because we're not going God's way. All of this religious activity doesn't get us closer to God. It actually keeps us away from God. Now, the way in which we get closer to God is actually by admitting our failure to help ourselves rather than our success. And this may be reflected in the Cain and Abel story in Genesis 4. As Cain comes with the best of his crops to offer to God. Look what I have achieved. Maybe that's what he's doing. It doesn't say. Abel comes and he offers an animal sacrifice. Now let's remember that there's no law here. There's no way of automatically knowing whether or not we've done the right thing. But God likes what Abel has done. He doesn't like what Cain's done. Now, Cain is angry about this. He's faced rejection from God. In our humanity, we really don't like the idea that God could reject us. We want to be acceptable to God. We want God to accept us. We might even want to blame God if we feel we're unacceptable to him. It's somehow his fault. Or if we do feel unacceptable to God, we don't feel we can do anything about it, which is a con trick of the devil. Because what happens with Cain, if you notice, is that initially God doesn't judge him for anything. He just says, well, he got it wrong. And Cain's really angry about this. He's sitting in judgment over God and saying, you should accept this. In other words, he's putting God in the wrong and himself in the right. What if he had come to God and said, I'm really sorry, I thought that was going to be the right thing. Do tell me what to do in future. Help me out here. It may be that God would have looked upon him with favour. But you see, God knew about the inside as well as the outside and what the offering really meant. We can kid ourselves that when we do something religious or spiritual, that it means what we want it to mean. But it doesn't. It means what God understands it to be.